Okay, so for lesson 3, you're going to count by fives and by ones on the number line as a strategy to tell time to the nearest minute on the clock. So this is just what we've been doing. We practiced telling time on the first lesson by counting by fives and then counting by ones, and that helped us tell time to the nearest minute. And now we're going to practice that on the number line, and that's going to in turn help us whenever we're telling time on the clock. Okay, so when we're taking a look at the number line and we're taking a look at the clock, it says, how's the clock similar to our number line? And I kind of talked to you about this in the last lesson or the lesson before, I don't remember. But this right here shows that if I were to take this clock and I were to make it into a straight line, it would look just like my number line does here. So our number line's just like a clock, they just look different. That's why sometimes it's easier to look at a number line because we can do more things on that easier since it's straight and not round like the clock, but they still represent the same thing. So when we're looking at the tick marks, we can see that the tick marks on the clock represent the minutes, and that's what the tick marks on our number line represent as well. So number line, clock, same thing, they just look a little bit different. Whoopsie, went backwards. Okay, so by now you don't have to draw a number line anymore. You have your number line paper that already has the number lines there for you. And we've already skip counted by fives on all the number lines, so you don't have to worry about skip counting by fives on them. That's already there for you as well. So the first thing that it says up here says let's find 58 minutes on the number line. So it says put your finger on 0 and then count by fives until we get to 55. If you did not know where the 55 was on a clock, then you would have to start counting by fives until you found 55, because when you're on a clock, the 55 is actually at number 11. So we want to find 58 minutes, so we would start right here at 55, and then we would draw tick marks until we got to 58. So in between each number on a clock, we know that there are going to be 5 minutes. So we've got 55, so then we would have to do 56, 57, 58, and then, whoopsie, and then 59, and then that next tick mark would be 60. So we're going to have 4 tick mark lines in between 55 and 60, and now we have to count from 55 until we get to 58. So we're going to be counting these individual tick marks. So we've got 56, 57, 58. So that means that right here is where 58 is going to be. So let's say that our number line was starting at 3 and it was ending at 4. So we could say if we were to put a point right here that it would be 3:58. Okay, so above the 0 on your number line, I want you to put 7 a.m. and then above the 60, I want you to put 8 a.m. And then we're going to start labeling some points on our number line. So it says, I arrived at school at 7:37. This isn't me. This is whoever wrote this, because I would have to get to school before 7:37 because I have to pick you guys up at 7:30. So now we have to find 7:37 on the number line. So we know that we're going to start at 35, and we're going to start making some tick marks in between 35 and 40. So we're going to make as many tick marks as we need to get us from 35 to 40. We're not going to stop right at 37. So with your pencil, you're going to make tick marks with me. So this would be 36, this would be 37, this would be 38, and then the next one would be 39. So now all we need to do is make a dot or plot a point right at 37. So we know that this one was 37, and that shows exactly what time this person got to school. That would be 7:37. Okay, and this is kind of exactly what we would do on a clock. We would go to the 5-minute mark that we were needing to get to, and then we would skip count by ones until we found the right time. So the next problem is 7:13. So now we've got to start at our 10 and add tick marks until we get to the 15, and then we'll plot a point for 7:13. So you can still work with the same number line. We don't have to go to a new number line. So now we're going to make tick marks in between the 10 and the 15. So we've got 11, 12, 13, and 14. And then we'll just make a point where 713 is. Whoopsie. It's kind of hard to draw a point on the computer. Okay, so we've got a point at 713. Okay, the next time that we're going to be working with is 749. So we know that's going to be between 45 and 50. So we've got to make our tick marks in between 45 and 50. So we're going to say 46, 47. That's a long tick mark. Okay, so 47. Oh, I'm just going to leave it long. 48, and then 49. And we'll be able to draw our point right here on 49. And I'm having a hard time drawing for some reason, and then I got rid of all my tick marks. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, let me just redraw my lines. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm going to erase. Okay, so we're drawing a point right at 49. Now that I've actually got mine ready to go. Okay, now we're ready to move on. We've got all of our points plotted for each individual times that we were working with on here. I'm not going to do this next one. I'm going to be ready to move on to the next problem. It says, the 12 on the clock represents the end of 1 hour and the beginning of another. And we've talked about that before. So we start at a new hour when we're at 12, and that's actually when the next hour is ending as well. So this clock shows what time I woke up this morning. So by looking at this clock, just telling some time, what time did I wake up this morning? So I want you to get that written down on your piece of paper. Doesn't have to be on your number line paper. You can just do this on a regular piece of paper. And once you have that down, you can push play to check it. Okay, so the time that I woke up is 5:42. You can see that the hour hand is in between the 5 and the 6, and the minute hand is right past the 8. So when you skip counted all the way to 8, you ended at 40. So then it was at 41, and then it was at 42. This next slide says that this clock shows what time I usually leave school. So looking at this clock, I want you to write down the time that I usually leave school on your piece of paper. And once you have that time down, you can push play to check it and see if you are correct. Okay, so the time that I usually leave school is at 4:17. The hour hand was in between the 4 and the 5, so it was at 4 for the hour. And then if you skip counted by 5s to the 3, you got 15, and then we've got 16 and 17, so that's where we get 4:17. And then this has got two parts to it. It says, this clock shows the time Sarah arrived at school. So this is what time Sarah gets to school. John arrived at school 12 minutes before Sarah. So we are trying to figure out what time did John actually get to school. That's why this clock is blank, because we're not sure yet. So the first thing I want you to do on your piece of paper is figure out what this time is showing on this clock, because that's going to tell us the time that Sarah got to school. So on your piece of paper, write down the time that this clock shows and push play whenever you're ready to see if you're correct. Okay, so the hour hand is in between the 7 and the 8, so we know that it's 7 something. The minute hand is after the 5, and I know that if I were skip counting by 5s until I got to the 5, that would take me to 25. So then this is 26, and that's 27. So that tells us that Sarah got to school at 7:27. Be careful when looking at this. It says John arrived at school 12 minutes before Sarah. Okay, so it's not 12 minutes after Sarah got to school, it's 12 minutes before. So it's like we're going to be counting backwards. Okay, so the easiest way to figure this out, since we're just looking at the minutes here and we're not switching to another hour, the minutes on 7:27 was just 27. Okay, and if John got there 12 minutes before Sarah did, then all we have to do is take 12 minutes away from 27, and what we are left with is going to be the minutes that we can put with 7 o'clock to go with what time John got to school. So on your piece of paper, I want you to do 27 minus 12, and push play whenever you're ready to check that. Okay, so 27 minus 12 gives us 15. So that tells us that John got to school at 7:15. Okay, so sometimes whenever we're working with time, yes, you can do a simple addition or a simple subtraction problem to help you figure out the right time, especially when you're just working with the minutes and not the hour, and if the hour is staying the same, that gives it an easier problem for you to solve. Okay, so it says Mom had dinner ready, but Rachel did not start eating until 15 minutes after dinner was ready. This clock shows what time dinner was ready, so the first thing I want you to do on your piece of paper is write down what time this clock shows so we know what time dinner was actually ready. So once you have this time written down on your piece of paper, you can push play to check your answer. Okay, so the hour hand is going to be 5. We know it's in between the 5 and the 6, so we know that it's 5 something. Skip counting by 5s until you get to 2, so we've got 10, and then we've got 11, 12, 13. So that tells us that dinner was ready at 5:13. But Rachel did not start eating until 15 minutes after dinner was ready, not before. So if it's after dinner was ready, then we're going to have to keep counting forward on the clock to figure out what time she actually started eating. So the easiest thing to do, once again, is just to add the minutes here to the minutes on the time. So we know that it's still going to be 5 something whenever she starts eating. We're just not sure what the minutes for that is just yet. So on your piece of paper, I want you to go ahead and add 15 minutes and 13 minutes together to see what minutes we're going to put with our 5 o'clock to see what time Rachel started eating. So answer 15 plus 13. We know that 15 plus 13 is 28, so that tells us that Rachel started eating at 5:28. Okay, so once again, just a simple addition problem right here to help us figure out what time Rachel started eating. Okay, so now we're ready for the problem set. If you want to have that out and ready so we can do that together. Okay. So this number line is a little bit different than the ones that we've looked at before. This one is skip counting by tens, and it's skipping the 5s in there in between. And it has the individual tick marks for the minutes as well, so it's not just the 5 minutes, because in this lesson we're working with the 5 minutes, but so we're also working to the nearest minute. Okay, so number 1 says plot a point on the number line for the times shown on the clocks below, and then draw a line to match the clocks to the points. So you can see that the first one's already done for us. So what I want you to go ahead and do on your paper is I want you to write the time underneath these clocks for what time these clocks are showing, since they aren't digital clocks. So once you have the time for these 3 clocks written on your paper, I want you to push play so you know that you have the times written down correctly. Okay, so this first clock shows 7:17. I know it's kind of tricky to see. The hour hand shouldn't have been very tricky. It's just a little bit past the 7, so we know the hour is 7. The minute hand was pointing at the 17 minutes, so this is 7:17. This one right here, I hope you didn't get tricked up. I know that it looks like it's right there on the 8, but the minute hand is close to the 12, which means it's almost to the next hour. So it's not 8 something, it's 7 something. If it was 8:56, then the hour hand would be very close to the 9, because it would almost be 9 o'clock. So 56 was the minutes. It was right there past the 11, which was at 56. So this time shows 7:56. If you wrote down that it was 8 something, you need to erase that and fix that. And I don't want you to I want you to do your very best not to get tricked up with that. Just remember, if the minute hand is close to the 12, the hour hand is close to the next hour, so you have to be very careful whenever you're looking at the times on the clock that are like that. This next one, once again, it's kind of close to the 8. It's not quite there yet, so the hour is still 7. And then the minute hand is right past the 8, so we're right at 7:41. So now we're ready to draw a line from the clocks and from this digital clock to the right time on the number line. So if this first one was at 17, we know that we're going to have to get to the 15 mark, and I know that in between 10 and 20 right here would be 15. So then I just need to count to 17. So I've got 16 and 17. So I'm going to draw a line from here to the 17 mark on my number line. I'm not going to draw a point because it's kind of hard for me to do that, but I do want you to draw a point on yours. And then we're going to do the same thing with 7:03. I'm going to start at 0, and then I'm going to count to the third tick mark. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3. So we'll draw a line from this clock to the 7:03 part of the number line. And then what I want you to go ahead and do is get the line drawn from 7:56 and from 7:41 to the right spots in the number line. Once you have those lines drawn, you can push play to check yours. So 7:56 would go right over here, right after 7:55. And then 7:41 is going to go right here after 7:40. So now we're ready to move on to number 2. Okay, it says Jessie woke up this morning at 6:48 a.m. Draw hands on the clock below to show what time Jessie woke up. Okay, one thing that we haven't really done a lot is actually draw the lines on the clock. If it's 6:48, 48 means that it's closer to 60 than it is to 0. So whenever you're drawing your hand for the hour, you're not going to draw it directly on 60 because, like I said before, whenever the minute hand is moving, so is the hour hand. And so since the minutes are getting closer to 60, that means it's getting closer to the next hour. So your hour hand kind of needs to be right about there because it's getting closer to 7 o'clock. Okay, so now we're ready to do 48. So when we're skip counting by fives, the closest one to 48 is 45. So we need to find where 45 is. So we've got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, and then we're going to go and see where 48 is. So we've got 46, 47, 48. So we're going to draw our minute hand right here where this 48 mark is. 48. Okay, so now our clock shows 6:48. So now we're going to do the same thing for number 3. It says Miss Barnes starts teaching math at 8:23. Draw hands on the clock to show what time she starts teaching math. So our minutes right here is 23, so it's not quite close to 9 o'clock. It's probably closer to 8 o'clock than it is 9 o'clock. But our hour hand is just going to be a little bit past the 8 o'clock. Okay, so get your hour hand drawn, and then on your own this time I want you to draw your minute hand to where it would be pointing at 23 minutes. So once you have that drawn, you can push play to see if you have it drawn correctly. Okay, so you had to skip count by fives until you at least got to 20 because 20 is closest to 23. So we've got 5, 10, 15, 20. And then you would skip count from 20 all the way to 23. So that would be right here on the clock. So now this clock shows 8:23, and I hope that is what your clock shows as well. Okay, so now we're ready for the back side. It says the clock shows what time Rebecca finishes her homework. So by looking at this clock, I want you to write down what time Rebecca does finish her homework, and whenever you have that time written on your paper, you can push play to see if you have it written correctly. Okay, so the hour hand is in between the 6 and the 5, so we know that it's still going to be 5 something. The minute hand is right here past the 5, so if you skip counted by fives until you get to 5, that was 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and then we've got to skip count the minute mark. So we've got 26 and 27. So that tells us that she finishes her homework at 5:27. Okay, so number 5 says, the clock below shows what time Mason's mom drops him off for practice. So part A says, what time does Mason's mom drop him off? So by looking at this clock, we have to figure out what time is this showing, because that's what time Mason's mom drops him off for his practice. So I want you to go ahead and get this time written right here underneath this question on your paper. Whenever you have that time written, you can push play to check it and see if you're right. Okay, so once again, the hour hand is very close to the 4, but it's not on there quite yet. So we still have our hour as being 3. And then the minute hand is right there past the 11. So if you skip counted by 5s all the way till you got to 11, that was 55. So you just need to count one more minute. So that would have been 56. So the time that his mom dropped him off was 3:56. The next part of the question says, Mason's coach arrived 11 minutes before Mason's arrived. So not 11 minutes after he arrived, so we're not going to go forward on the clock. We're going to go backwards because he got there before Mason did. So this is kind of like what I showed you on the concept development, where you can do that simple addition or subtraction problem to help you figure out what time it's asking for. So if he arrived 11 minutes before Mason, then we know we're going to be subtracting because we're going back on the number line. So I want you to just look at the minutes because we're still sticking with the same hour. We know that Mason got there at 3:56, and we know that his coach got there 11 minutes before him. So all we have to do is 56 minus 11 to see what that is going to give us, and then that will tell us that Mason's coach got there at 3 something. We're just not sure what time that is yet. So go ahead and solve that subtraction problem to see what time Mason's coach got there. And whenever you have that down, you can push play. So we know that 56 minus 11 is going to be 45. So that tells us that his coach got there at 3:45. And now we have that question answered. Okay, so you're ready to move on to the exit ticket. You see that there's 3 different parts here, so make sure you're answering each part and doing exactly what it tells you to do. Once you have that completed, you can bring it to me so we can check it.